Today, our theme is manuscript development process, part 1. Yesterday, we were dealing with basics in scientific writing. And today, we are zeroing in on how to develop a manuscript, the process that we will go into. Now, specifically for today, we are going to focus on 3 things. We would like to share with you the structure and content of a well-written research article. Of course, we cannot claim that we are going to share the entire content of a research article within the next 2.5 hours that we have. But we would like to now start the process, because you'll realize that once we start, that will be our program. Because the content of how you write a discussion, how you write, will now be our engagement throughout the session. So here we are sharing the structure, and then we start the process of the content for each of the parts of a manuscript. And you'll see within the next slides on how this is going to roll out. We would like to be very spot on, because we know that one of the challenges that students face is ending at reports. You go to the field, and not only students, all researchers, we go to the field and we write very good reports. But the challenge is being turning those reports or theses into acceptable journal articles that are in the rigor of what a journal should accept. And many theses end there, and they never proceed to the next step of becoming a journal article. Or even research reports from the field, they simply end there. We would like to share guidelines for presenting, writing, and interpreting results. And very soon you will see why we are starting with results and not any other part in the paper. As a recap for yesterday, our objectives were clear, 3 of them, and we tried to the extent possible to keep ourselves within the limits of the objectives. There were so many questions, and these questions were touching so many things, but we needed to remind ourselves that we had a purpose, and that purpose was to, among others, look at the importance of academic writing, ethical principles, and the stature of a scholar. We looked at key issues for consideration in scientific writing, and we also highlighted article formats and types in scientific writing and publishing. We have already shared the presentation that we had yesterday, and accompanied this with 2 interesting articles. One of the articles is on the essence and transcendence of scientific publishing, and the other article is about a step-by-step process in scientific publishing. And we would like to interest you to follow up this information. And because this is a virtual engagement, we think that the only way we can promote hands-on is for us to interest you to be able to read more on yourself. So there has to be self-drive, and we are going to share a lot of documents that some of them will be answering to the questions that you raised. And thanks for your participation on the homework. We are overwhelmed. We've received a lot of responses with very interesting questions. And I just brought an example to the slide here. These are questions that you've raised, and very interesting questions. We would like to give you hope that in the step-by-step process of going through the questions, we shall be answering and attending to these questions. We shall have a section on how to write an effective methodology, for example. We shall have a section on how to deal with data. We shall have a section. Now, statistical analysis. Yes, we will touch a bit of this, but as we indicated yesterday that our assumption actually is that you've analyzed your data and you read it right and you have results. So the analysis bit of statistics is to be handled in another training and not this training. But we'll talk about an abstract, we'll talk, and as you will see, the program lineup. Now, I'm sure each of us has interacted with a typical journal manuscript or a typical journal article. Remember, yesterday we said that a manuscript is that which has not yet been published, but is a draft that is being processed for publication. And so an article is that which has been published. But this is what you have, that a manuscript being developed to a journal article will usually have a title. There is a title. After the title, there is authors. It could be one author or a list of authors. I've seen a paper that had over 62 authors. These were people working in a lab, and everyone had done something about this protocol. And it was a new invention, so 62 authors. And normally, this listing of authors is guided by what the journal prefers. Some journals prefer that you put the postal address, P.O. Box 01 Kampala, Uganda. Some of them prefer that you just put the institution and then you put the email address of the corresponding author. Normally we have one corresponding author, but sometimes there can be more than one. I've also seen those kind of papers. And after that has been done, and it also follows a style. Every journal has a style. This is why it is important for you to follow journal style of writing and author guidelines. After the author listing, there is the abstract. Then we have the introduction, we have the materials and methods, we have the results, we have the discussion. Many journals also accept the format of results and discussion. And we would like to advise that for young scholars that are learning how to write or engaging with this into early career, it is better to write the results section alone and the discussion section alone. Otherwise, if you say results and discussion, one will underplay the other. And in the end, you think you have a results section, yet you have a discussion section. There is a tendency to say data reveal that, and then this is in line with, you are already discussing, so you have not narrated your data. Because results is about data narration, as we shall see. Then there is a conclusion. Some people say conclusions. There can only be one conclusion. We cannot have more than. And then recommendations. Again, sometimes many journals will say, or many authors will have results, conclusion and recommendations. But it's better to have these as standalone rather than combining them. For the reasons that you'll see as we get along. We will be talking in details about what should be in a conclusion and what should be in a recommendation, or what is a recommendation. And you realize that not all studies will actually come up with recommendations. Because if there is nothing for uptake pathways, for extension, for policymakers, for government, for end users, then we are not under obligation to conclude. Research is a cycle, so we are not under obligation to give recommendations. So since research is a cycle, your conclusion may be enough in itself because you are proposing further research or refinement of a protocol. So then no recommendation, there is no end user. You are still revolving within the research. But as I said, we'll get to the details of this. In many papers, there is also this section, a small section, one sentence, with the heading Declaration of Conflict of Interest. There is also acknowledgements, and it's normally written in plural because it is rare that you are only recognizing support from RUFORUM, but you'll be recognizing support from RUFORUM, from your university, so that's why it is acknowledgements that you have many people, many stakeholders that are involved with your work. And then after that, we have the reference listing. And as you'll get to know, this follows different styles. There is Upper, there is Boston, there is Vancouver, and so on and so forth. And the journals normally advise using author guidelines. It is also common these days to have a section after the reference that says supplementary materials. And these supplementary materials are normally listed. It is not typical for a journal article to have annexes or appendices, but supplementary material is evidence that you provide. For example, one of the challenges in scientific publishing is the predatory journals, for example. And one key feature about predatory journals is that they don't have review comments or robust review comments. So some journals have now developed a practice that for every paper that they publish, they actually put the name of the reviewer and then they attach the review report. They even attach the point-by-point response that the author used to respond to the review reports. And so these are supplementary materials to show to show how comprehensive, how far this article has come and how far the process has come. But we are also living in the era of open data science. And because we're living in the era of open data science, some journals actually demand that you release the raw data, Excel spreadsheets, ANOVA tables, which are not tables within the manuscript, but you release them and they use them as supplementary material. And when the paper is on the website, it also has attachments within it that you can simply click. So they say supplementary material to that paper. And those supplementary materials are the 3 reviews or 2 reviews, the data, the graphs, the maps, and location, and any other considerations that the authors did, but were not considered in the content of the manuscript. So these become supplementary materials. Now, please note that author guidelines vary, and it's important to read and follow the guidelines. We have always said time and again that the writing of the paper should not take so much consideration of the guidelines, but the packaging of the paper should. So you write the paper without guidelines, but while you're packaging to submit, you consider the guidelines. Now, the reason why we say that is that sometimes some guidelines can be so restrictive and they can take over the writing process. So rather than you writing, you are more concerned about the guideline than sharing the news in the paper. So it's important to develop the manuscript, then tailor it to suit the guidelines of the target journal. And we'll be talking about selecting a journal. And now you know why we have not said that select a journal, then think of the title, then think of the abstract. No, first write. And then after you've written, you have the blueprint to work with. And that blueprint will now be customized to the guidelines of the journal. Now, this is very, very important. It is the process that you now have to use to develop a manuscript. And we are calling it a step-by-step process. We have just shared the standard template for journal manuscripts. And maybe before we leave the standard template, we would like to highlight that this is common for the biophysical sciences, the experimental sciences, and it is a less common structure and setup for the humanities, social sciences, life and physical. These are guided by innovativeness, that you have a journal on humanities and social sciences, and they probably used grounded theory. Now, grounded theory is a process of discovering a theory. So then it will not have these materials and methods and what, it will just be a narration of how this has been done. And yesterday we did mention that there is a lot of innovativeness that is needed in writing such articles. So that's where you will find, instead of materials and methods, they will say approach. So they don't have, they have the methods, but they are no materials. They don't have tape measure that you measured. They don't have, yes. So it's not materials and methods, it's approach. Then instead of results, they will say findings, and so on. Or they will not have any of those. They will simply have an introduction, sometimes no even abstract title. They move to introduction, and then they start the process of writing in paragraphs. And where you have significant paragraphs, they put a heading, and the paper is acceptable. It is a narration of what actually happened. If you're doing thematic analysis, for example, eh, and you have dominant themes that are coming up, then those dominant themes become the sections for the paper. And they are not they are not results. They are not, every time you present a dominant theme, you discuss it. So this kind of paper may not have a discussion section. It will just have quotes from respondents, and then you discuss that quote, and you move on. So this varies depending on discipline, but again, the most standard template is what we have presented here. Now, whether you're from the social sciences or you're from the biophysical, biological sciences, the first step that you need to do in developing a manuscript is for you to assemble data. And probably the data is already assembled. You have it in your thesis. But then you need to select. And by selection, we are referring, in your thesis, you probably have 100 tables, 10 graphs, 6 plates. But there is this plate, there is this graph or this map that has news. Remember, we said for journal publications, we are talking about newsworthy information, and not everything that you have in your research report. And by the way, a thesis is a research report. So not everything that you have in your research report is newsworthy. It may be something that was used to back up something, and now in the paper you are not telling us that now therefore cities exist. I mean, we know that cities are there. There is Kampala, there is Nairobi, there is Accra, there is Addis Ababa. So now are you going to tell us all of a sudden that you've discovered cities, just like the colonialists were telling us that they discovered the source of the Nile, they discovered mountain Kenya, they discovered now. The originals and the natives knew about these things and they were there. So this was news to them in the European geography. But it was not news to us, you see? So now we are in the journals, we are looking for something newsworthy. So this is why you will see that some theses are not published. But it's also the reason why you will find that you can have more than 4 or 3 journal articles from your thesis. Because when you select the data, you'll find that from, say, 10 tables, some tables are giving one line of story, then 2 are giving another line of story. So yesterday we said that a journal publication is a story, a complete story that you're writing narratively. And normally it is one thread of a story, not mixed messages. And once you have mixed messages, that is a recipe for rejection. Most journals will reject such papers that are, the breeders call it noise. They have a lot of noise. The preponderance of these articles is so high. So once the noise is so high, then it will be rejected. It is causing pollution in scientific advancement. So one message. So you choose a paper that is talking about, data that is talking about that message, and you line it up. This could be graphs, it could be pie charts, it could be narrative, because you remember narration is also data. It could be quotes, it could be, yes. And once you line it up, then you craft. This is the second step. You craft an objective based on the newsworthy data. Now, this is very important. Remember, your research, your report, your thesis already has an objective, overall, specific. Now, within your specific objectives, once you pick 5 tables, then the ball game is changing. You had 50 tables, but out of the 50 tables, you've picked 5. So then there is a sub objective that is defining these 5. It surely cannot be the specific objective that gave you the results chapter 4, because the results chapter 4 was riding on this big objective. But now you have a smaller objective, which is a segment within your specific objective. So that's why you see for journals, we have an objective for a paper. And that objective is normally a short segment of your overall objective or your specific objective. Now, it is important to understand this, because once you fail to craft an objective that describes the selected data, then the write-up will be wrong, because the entire write-up must be pointing to that objective. And you'll also notice that in theses and reports, there is a very strong focus on objectives. It's actually a section and what. Now, in papers, it's not. When you're writing the introduction gravitates towards stating that subsection of the objective. So, and we shall get to this, because we'll be looking at how to write an effective introduction for a journal manuscript. And so in the introduction, this is where we fit everything. It is different from your proposal for thesis. It is different from your thesis, where you have a dedicated section which says objective. Yeah. Now, once you have the objective and you've arranged the data, you now start the process of writing the narrative. And that narrative about your data is what we call interpretation of results. And that interpretation of results is the results section. So I hope we are following, and we are saying that the very first section that you pay attention to in writing a manuscript is the results. And the results is yours. You know what you did, you know how you did it, and how you did it is actually methodology. But what you did and what you achieved from what you did is the results. And this is a very, very important section, because this is where we find the news of what you're trying to beam out in the world, of what you're trying to put in the public locations, which is the publication. Now, as an editor, I would probably not edit your results and say, you know, this figure is wrong. I could say this figure is wrong, because if you have And if you have list LDL, if you have coefficient of variations that are not making sense, if you have means that are more than the expected standard, then there will be queries. But you know, the results are yours. You're the one that generated them. So as an editors have little to do with the results, apart from the science in the results. So this is your section, and this is where the news is. And so the interpretation of results will never carry a reference. Because now, if you are putting a reference, then they are not yours. Yeah, yeah, but here we are writing what we found. Unless this is a paper on literature, and so you have to present the literature search indexes and what, but really this is your section. Now, the next step, number 4, is to write out the meaning of those results. In terms of the context to the already existing body of knowledge. And this is where the discussion now comes, and this is where we expect references. Now, there is a thin line between step 3 and 4, and many young career scientists mix up this. They say results, and then you see that over 3/4 of what they are calling results is actually discussion. So today, we are going to give tips on how to interpret results, how to write results without having to devolve into a discussion. Now, once you have the discussion section, then you can comfortably write a conclusion. The conclusion must link and must be a tie-up between the results and the discussion. I have seen many papers where the conclusion quickly rushes and says, you know, government therefore is doing this and this. And then there is no objective in the government. I mean, the objective doesn't have any government concern. We see in many papers where the conclusion is relating to the population of the study. But the population and the whether gender or female is not anywhere in the objective. So you see how challenges start, or issues to do with the seasonality. Season 1 was greater than. Now, seasonality was being done in order to improve your mean and tell the world that the findings I've got were not by accident, but that every season, this is what is expected. Because if we have only one season, it is possible that it was a random error, that the yields were high. But if we have 3 seasons and consistently the yields are high, then we can now conclude. So the conclusion is drawing from your objective, is drawing from the results, is drawing from the discussion. And similarly, the recommendation ties it up and gives a pointer to what needs to be done. It provides the evidence that is in the results and discussion, and what are the needed actions by the end users and various stakeholders. That is the recommendation. So as we said, it is possible to have a paper without recommendations because there may be no needed actions. Yeah. Now, once you've done all this, the next step to write, which is step 7, is the materials and methods. Or, depending on what you're writing and what discipline you're coming from, this could be your approach, or it could be the process. Some journals can say process. Yeah, if you're developing a food, a new food product, then you may not talk about materials and methods, but you talk about a process. So the Journal of Food Industry may not have this kind of jargon of materials and methods. It may simply have process or, yeah. And this is very easy to write because it should not be a lifting of what your materials and methods are from the thesis. But it should now be a description that relates to the data that you've selected. Because each table, each graph, each dendrogram, each that you've selected, each quote that you've selected to constitute your result has a process by which it was obtained. So the materials and methods section, or the methodology, or the approach, is a process where you describe chronologically of what you did. Now, you shouldn't worry, because from what you've realized now, we are today going to start from number 1 to 3, hopefully. And then in the subsequent days, we are simply going to continue with the process. So tomorrow, we're going to talk about discussion section. What is it that you have to have in the discussion section? Then we will follow with conclusion. So I think on Thursday, we should be talking about methodology. And what is it that you should have in a methodology for you to ensure? And I think those are some of the questions that you were asking from the submissions that we received. That how can I write a good methodology? How can I write a good title? So from what we are saying, you can see that title is coming at the very end, because a title is a name. Now, we cannot name something which we don't understand. But once you have your data, you have your results, you have your discussion section, you have the conclusion, you have the recommendation, you have the materials and methods, you have the background, you have the list of references, then you have a grip on the document. And so now you can give this document a name. And that name, once you follow this process, will not be your thesis title, definitely. Because the thesis title is promising many chapters, is promising more objectives, is promised. But remember, you've only selected a few data which gives a full story. And when we say few, we are not saying that every article should have only 1 table, 3 tables, 5 tables. So some articles can have up to 10 tables or what. The thing is completeness of the story, completeness of the line of argument that you have picked from the data set. So it is possible that in the completeness of the line of argument and the guidelines of the journal, it is possible that you can have 10 tables, and that's allowed. Yeah. So you need to understand this. So after the references, we have the title, we have the author names. And you know, this is important. You don't come up with the authors at the beginning, because then you remember your methodology being described in the paper is now totally different or slightly different. So now, who were the people that are associated with that particular analysis and with that particular methodology? And these are people who should be able to talk for the paper. It is even when you wake them up in sleep, they say, yeah, I understand that work, we achieved this and this. And it's not just people who are not associated, who were paid. It's not the data enumerators. It is not the lab technicians. It's not the drivers, but it is somebody who can speak for the paper. Of course, we also have what we call guest authors. But the guest author should not be your wife or your boyfriend. Yeah, because they can't speak for the paper. So even the guest author could be this senior scientist that is the head of your lab, that is the director of your research institution, that is the head of a theme in gender. And so And by the time they became director, they understand the field of gender. And wherever you take them, they can explain. So even if they didn't see this paper, the concepts in the paper are not foreign to them. Yeah, so and we shall get to that. We shall have, I think on day 5, we shall have a tips on authorship and who is an author, who is a co-author, who is a senior author. There are a lot of words that sometimes come. And for us handling journals, we see them that a paper is submitted and there is a list of authors. And by the time the paper is approved, the first author is now number 3 because the paper was approved. So somehow when the paper gets comments and is improved, some names are being added out of nowhere. Paper started with 2 authors, but by the time of publication, it has 6 authors, and so on and so forth. So you can see that they are coming at the end. Now, declaration of conflict of interest is also coming at the tail end because it applies to all those. Within your methods, you probably used certain chemicals that you obtained from some company. Yes. Within your introduction, you probably mentioned some organization, and that organization is now not linked anywhere, but you now need to say that the Sibagege is not associated with this paper or something. Yeah, so this is where declaration is coming. Yeah. Now, you need now to provide an acknowledgement as the second last step, and then lastly, write an abstract. Now, the abstract is a summary of the paper, and you cannot have the summary before all the sections. And you notice that within the summary, you may need all these sections. Even the acknowledgement may feature in the summary. This work was done, this is a research station. This network. Yes, it was from the Reform Network. You see? Now, if you wrote the abstract before acknowledgement, now you are not acknowledging the network. So you can see this work was inspired by the Reform Network during a training, and this is an opening statement in the abstract. So, friends, this is the step-by-step process in developing a journal manuscript. And this suggested approach is intended to ensure and secure consistency and avoid mixed messages. The main reason why editors will reject a paper is mixed messages, that the paper is confused and is not communicating news. And it is not that sometimes there is no news. There may be news, but the packaging of the news is lacking. And sometimes you read the papers and you realize, however much you will advise, it is very difficult to entangle and redeem the paper. So the best you can do is to reject. Because even when you try to redeem and give guidance, the feedback is such that you probably don't understand this field. Now, I don't understand this field, but publication is a publication, whether it's from social science, whether it's from biochemistry, whether it is, yeah. So the issue is one message at a time. And even if you have mixed messages, there has to be a thread, they have to be related. Logic, yeah. There has to be logic. You don't talk about fruits, then talk about eggs, then now talk about birds in the air, then no. Let us know the birds in the air, how they fly, and even the birds in the air and how they fly. There are those that are nocturnal. So which birds are you really? Yeah. So in a paper, we expect the nocturnal birds on their own. We expect those with less feathers on their own. So it has to be one message at a time. Yeah. So mixed messages is a major reason for rejection. But this approach that we are proposing here, the 14 steps, will give you a logical flow of the message. And this message is actually the news. So in a journal article, in a journal manuscript, we are writing to focus on the news. And because it is news, the reader must be excited right from the top to the bottom of the paper, they should not just read the title, authors, and end there. They say, now, again, they have come. So this points to completeness. And once the message is complete, nothing should be left hanging. There should be no questions. It should be a complete story. Now, you need to note that the proposed steps are the upside down of how a paper looks like. You can see title is coming at number 10. Abstract is coming at number 14. So this is only a process of writing. And after developing the manuscript, then the authors need to rearrange the sections to follow the standard presentation that we shared in an earlier slide. And this standard presentation, so you now rearrange and have your title to come first, authors, abstract. And now, as you rearrange this standard presentation, you now start a process of visiting the journal guidelines and see what are they saying. Is the title in uppercase or in lowercase? How are the authors listed? Are they advising that the abstract should be 1 page or 250 words? If you had 1 page that you had written and they need 250 words, then you now summarize. If they are saying that the abstract should have sections in it, there are those papers which say abstract background, 1 statement. Materials and methods, 1 sentence. Results, 3 sentences, and so on and so forth. And when we talk about abstract, there's something I missed here. The abstract is incomplete if there are no keywords. So it is the key, that paragraph of the abstract and the keywords constitute the abstract. And the abstract is also incomplete without a title. So it is the title, the narrative, and normally that package from number 1, title, authors, abstract, is only complete, is what we call the abstract. I think this ends it. And please, my colleague here will add a few things, and in case we have 1 or 2 questions, please feel free before we engage another Gia to move to the next point of conversation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Let me also have my voice registered on the system. Paul has indicated that the writing process takes different sections at a time, and not in the order the paper is expected to be organized. Now, when you feed the sections you have developed back into the shelves of the table of contents, of course, obviously, those sections will not flow. The story will not flow. So you need to go back and restructure in a way that there is a flow, a smooth flow, following the study objective. Use the study objective effectively to manage and organize the article or the manuscript. Now, when we say study objective, to be able to guide the process, the construction must have rules. What governs the design or construction of an objective? You have already met some scenarios indicating that the specific objective should be SMART. And I think you can go and look at specific objective and SMART and find out what that means. If it is not SMART, don't expect miracles. But you can also keep refining the objective as you write along, as you go along to write your manuscript. Yes, we will be talking about some of these things later on as we discuss how to construct different sections. But some of these come up and we don't want to miss them along the way. When we say interpretation of data, what we are saying is write the story. A story is not made up of numbers in tables. If a table is given to different readers, they will imagine different scenarios. Everybody will take off at a different tangent. But you, as the author, you are supposed to guide those readers so that they focus and understand things the way from your own perspective. Okay? So an interpretation is the story form, the narrative, the text that is depending on what the data are saying. Okay? So it is trying to say what the data are showing. As far as the objective is concerned, okay, the story, most people prefer the text, the narrative. If you give them numbers, you switch them off. But if you give them the numbers to accompany the text, they will be pleased to read your story. Okay? And as you realize, in this writing process, we are not saying you refer to this article, refer to literature. No. This is the time now you are writing from your head because this is your work. Nobody else can write it better than you. So you are constructing everything in this draft from your head. Yes. I think one way to soften the writing process is when you start on each section, first of all, put bullets of what would be points in that section. And those bullets may not be in the order they are going to be written. Just put bullets and then think through these bullets to find out whether you can develop some form of order to be initial thinking. And then as you write, you can reorganize those bullet points and each one can form an abstract, a paragraph, or two can form a paragraph, and so on and so forth. So if you are writing a discussion, list points. If you are writing interpretation, list points. And those points can be turned into subtitles so that there's a logical flow. And the flow, if you considered A, B, C, D as parameters measured in materials and methods, for heaven's sake, when you get to results, don't start with what you ended with. You still follow the same logic and the same logic in the discussion. So it is good to always summarize in bullet points, what you are going to write about. And what you are writing about, plant height, the instructions, try to see whether you can use them in grain yield. Have some guiding principles so that there is a text a structure that is predictable and that is enviable, that people would like to copy. Okay? I'm about to finish. Yes. We talked about being innovative, especially in the humanities, the social sciences. you can create your own subtitles. I mean, for them, there's no template. And that is very good because then you control the writing process because everything you are doing is from you, but quite challenging. Okay. Yeah. Now, the subtitles of the sections in the paper should be following the objective again. So put the objective, forward and see how you can break the objective into subtitles for the different sections: introduction, methodology, and so on. You create subtitles following the objective, and there you can't go wrong. In other words, you can develop a table of contents before you even write, and then you keep changing within the writing process. Now, for those who work with plants, the best subtitles in the results and discussion are the parameters measured. If for some reason you had plant height, leaf area index, days to flowering, days to physiological maturity, grain yield, 100 grain weight, is it? Yeah, and so on and so forth. You have to follow the list as the work was done in methodology, and preferably let those parameters measured become the subtitles, because you are looking at how that parameter responded to the treatment or to the study factors. And then the science is also flowing through. And by the time you reach the grain yield, you can say, well, when we combine this and this treatment, you get this for plant height, you get this for... Therefore, it can be concluded that this treatment combination is the best. Assuming you have done everything required of experimental design, replication, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think that's where I can stop for now. It's sort of loud thinking, but we are going to refine all these things within each section. Unfortunately, we have 2 hours every day or 3 hours, and we need to discuss, to have interactive discussion with you, but we'll do the best we can.
So before we go to the next set of slides, can we get 1 or 2 questions, or are we, because we need to check whether we
Yes.
are following or what? Is there any points of clarification? Are we moving too fast? Are we moving too slow?
Yes, Prof. I can see Mary Goret here. Mary, please can go ahead with your question.
How do we get access to yesterday's resources? We shared this with RUFORUM, and the RUFORUM colleagues will share with you. So if you have registered, provide your email and they will send it to you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I can see also a question from James.
Yes, Atul.
James,
Can you
yes.
give 1 or 2 colleagues opportunity to respond? I know you muted them, so if there is
Yes,
a hand up, please give them opportunity to respond.
yes, please. James, go ahead, please. If you have any comment or question. James, can you hear us?
Hello?
Drico,
Are we
James.
speaking to ourselves?
No, they have been given a chance to ask a question, but their mics are
Hello?
muted.
Are we speaking to ourselves? But I see
Okay.
online we have 503 participants. So
No,
can I at least get,
Mary.
okay, Atul, you have your
Mary.
hand up. Mary Goretti,
Yes,
Yes,
Mary Goretti.
I have a
please
question.
go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. My name is Margaret Asimwe. My question is, in the presentation, you showed that
Please go ahead.
results and discussion are supposed to be separate chapters. But
Hello.
in social sciences, they advise us to combine these two. So I would love to get your clarification about that.
Somebody says not hearing anything. Hello.
No,
Hello.
I think Prof. Nampal, I think your network is not okay because we
My
can
network
hear
is not
Goretti
okay.
very
No, it's
clearly.
okay. So
May-
where
we-
did you lose? Where did you get lost? Have you been hearing us? Oh,
Yes, we are hearing you, Prof.
Prof.
okay.
Prof. Nampal, I think your network has issues because we can hear very well Goretti.
Yes.
Yeah, and we would like to hear from your side as well.
We can
So
hear
please
you very
go
well.
ahead. Yes, somebody has a hand up. Please allow them respond. Allow them.
No, I think their network is slow, so we might have to notify them and be patient with them a bit because we were hearing Goretti very clearly. Prof. Nampala,
Yes, we hear you.
your network had issues, but Goretti had a question. I don't know whether now
Okay,
you
so
can
Mary
get us
Goretti, go
clearly.
ahead.
Okay.
Yes, I was asking, my question was, when you were presenting, you showed that results and discussion are supposed to be separate chapters. But we've always been advised that we can combine the results and discussion section and we do it at once. So I wanted to get your clarification about that.
Well, in the context of writing journal manuscripts, follow the guidelines of the journal.
Okay.
But the process of developing, especially to young scholars, young career scientists, our advice is that write these sections as separate. As you will see, we will be sharing. These sections are different. If you don't separate them, you run the danger of capitalizing more on the other. Rather than interpreting results, you end up discussing them. So you have one line, results of stakeholder responses are presented in table 4. From the responses, it is clear that according to so and so, so you've already started the discussion. But the interpretation would be, we normally say, and probably we are preempting the sections we are going into, because we are now going to start results, how you select results and how you interpret results. But the analogy that we normally use is that assuming you're entering a big house with so many rooms, and you have somebody who has never been to that house, but it's your house, you're familiar with it. So as you enter this house, you then show this person and you say, this is the living room. In the living room, we put this in the corner. This chair is weak, we don't sit on it. We put the musical instruments this way. We keep some files here. So you see, now you're not discussing the why questions. Why do you keep files here? Why is this chair not used? Why? But you're simply telling this person, we don't sit in this area. We normally sit. Now, the why questions is when you are now returning and you say, you see, if you sit here, this is what happens. Yeah. If you keep the guitars and everything in every corner, then this will cease being a home. It's like a music industry. Yeah. So it is advisable that you write these separately. If a journal requires that they be combined, but you've at least written them. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, what we are talking about also helps you with the thesis. If you want to be articulate and objective in writing your thesis, best if you separate results from discussion. And if you write results very well, the discussion will be very informative and articulate. People will like your work. The thinking normally is to avoid explaining what is going on, so what, where do we move from here, what does literature say, and so on. Those are the questions I said you put aside so that for every parameter, you go through them. Okay? But if you combine the two, results and discussion, the mind will always want to say, this should be placed here, this should be done like this, the chairs are, and just leave it there. But ideally, for every result you narrate, there should be a discussion, an explanation, and the tendency is to moving towards explaining or informing the objective so that you eventually get a conclusion and a recommendation. That is the process.
Okay. Any other questions? I see there are questions in the chat room, and we shall try to answer them. Challenge is that we are using one computer, so we'll see how best we attend to this, but we will attend to the questions and type them up. Type responses. If there is no other question, can we proceed?
There's this question, Prof, from James. Are you there?
Yes, we are here.
No, I mean this James. James, are you with us? Oh, as network issues. I think you can go ahead, Prof.
Okay. So my colleague will take it up from here. Linking proposals to reports and publication. Thank you.
Okay. If you recall, Paul said we start with results. Why results? Because after writing the proposal, we promised that now we are going to the field and we are going to collect data, analyze data, and then continue with the process of research. So obviously then it is the results that we have to start with to continue the story that we started with the proposal. Okay? Now, when you start with the results, there are two ways. After finishing results, you can go back and streamline by writing the introduction, writing the title, writing whatever, or from results, you continue because the top parts have been represented by the specific objective you have formulated. From these results, which you have delineated as having news that we want to inform people about. And usually we go downwards. It is easier to write the upper sections after streamlining the lower sections. Okay? So from results, we go to discussion, we go to conclusion. The others references are whatever, those are housekeeping issues. Okay? Now, as you realize, and I realized this with my students at the time I was still teaching, when you write the conclusions properly, most of those will be results of the abstract. Okay? And you can't believe how convincing a research story is when you end with what you started with in the abstract. I mean, somebody will see the logic, and the logic is within what the results and within the way you have organized your story. Usually you end the conclusion with what you started with, because you went out to find out facts and give answers to questions. Now, after the conclusion, you have the answers, and that becomes the key issues within the abstract. And so ideally, the abstract is almost done. When you reach the conclusion, you only add a small background and then the objective statement. And I'm talking about this as applying to the thesis as well. This is something we developed with my students. Okay? So, linking, normally, it's difficult to know how to get what is in the proposal linked to the report or to the paper or to the thesis. So that's what we want to go through now. How do I go? It's not good. Okay. Yeah, I think the first part we have discussed that already. Now, a journal and proceedings, those are normally we call them scholarly materials, scholarly documents. What is scholarly? You know, scholars are great thinkers, and in many cases we think they think abstractly, in abstract form, and a scholar can see something where everybody else cannot see. And for that matter, therefore, there must be a writing style for scholars, accepted by scholars. Scholars are normally, they appreciate challenges in thinking, in schools of thought, and so on. Now, at this time, point in time, when we are writing papers or publications, the donor interests are no longer an issue. You remember when you wrote a proposal, you're considering the donor and the government. But at this stage, you don't have an apology to the donor. For some donors who may not want you to write about something contradictory to what they think was an innovation in their programs. But in most cases, the donor leaves you to write out your results, and they are not obliging you to publish. But when you do, then you might be convincing them to give you another award or to renew your project. But the donor has nothing to do with your publication. Okay? And then terminologies like project, stakeholder, beneficiary, project management, financing, auditing, and so on are no longer valid in a publication unless the publication is taking direction of one or two of those, of course. Yes. Okay. But when you are writing a report for the project, all those will be necessary in there, because then somebody can attach the expenditure to the activity and see who was involved, why, when, and so on and so forth. But for a paper, no. We don't want that will be I mean, it will be superfluous to what you are actually saying, the scientific news that you want to publish. Journal space is very competitive, and we have no room for what we can throw away. We ask ourselves many questions before we include something. So you may have something very interesting, but the reviewer will ask you the relevance of that to the study objective. Okay, we have a table here which relates theses, research reports with the journal articles, trying to show the differences in terms of structure and the content. And I don't think I will need to go through it. I'll leave it to you to read later on. Okay. Writing the science, the results, the message has nothing to do with selecting a journal. And we are going to talk about journal selection tomorrow or the other day. So the story should be the same for different journals. And all you need to do is to fine tune a few things to suit that journal. And when you have to do that, don't completely turn around your draft. Use the draft for that journal and wait and see, because chances are high that your manuscript will be rejected. And when rejected, then you can go back to your original draft and select another journal and fine tune for it. Don't write for a journal specifically. Write so that you then select a journal later afterwards. Like Paul said, journal interests, journal guidelines can take over the process and confuse you. Let them come in at the end. Okay? Innovative scientists or researchers will develop many papers or articles from one project. But this can be arranged even before the proposal is implemented. And research news, as you might realize, is when you are answering to a question that has no answer at that time. Okay? So the best way to make sure that your objectives lead you to publications, ask yourself, turn the objective into a question and see whether the answer can be provided using existing information. For example, somebody might be working on the effect of protein on kwashiorkor condition in children. The effect of protein on kwashiorkor in children. So supposing we turn that into a question, what is the effect of protein, a protein diet, on kwashiorkor in children? What is the chance that you have answers already, and you can use those answers to improve the condition of the child? What do you think is the probability that the answers are available and you don't need to do research to be able to address that problem? I believe it is more than 50%. So if it is more than 50%, that means the news is dwindling. There is almost no news, and there will be no miracle by the time you end this research and you are getting the same answers as existing originally. And therefore, in the reviews, we are asking ourselves, where is the news here? if you have already reviewed literature which shows how extensive previous work has been done, and to show answers to kwashiorkor condition, what are you trying to, what is the news? What gap are you trying to fill? And this work might have been done in the 50s, in the 40s, and now in 2025, you are talking about the same thing. Okay? Okay. Yes. Paul said one message for one article. One message. Because with that one message, you have space to focus yourself and to really turn around this message and come out with specific answers and recommendations. The more the messages, the more the tables and figures. Each message will come with its own tables and figures, and that will be too much for one paper. Okay, so that's why we said start with the results, select those that have news, and then line up any other illustrations. By illustration, we mean table or figure or whatever, map or whatever. Those are illustrations. Line them up and start writing. And a smart objective would preferably have no "and" in it. Protein quality and consumption preferences. So you can see you are working on two segments. Consumption preferences might go somewhere in food science or something. Protein quality might go somewhere, I don't know, in feeds. Different journals altogether. Okay. Yes. Although we are saying the title should come last, we should have some kind of draft guiding title derived from the objective, and that can be adjusted later on because it actually helps to guide writing the introduction and so on and so forth. So after we have sized the manuscript to the end, then now we know we can give a name to these contents in the form of a title, so that when I read a title, I can predict the contents. And of course, it shouldn't be a gamble prediction. The prediction should be reflective of the likely contents in that document. Unfortunately, we don't come from one part of the world, but in your clans and whatever, when they give somebody a name, like the first boy twin or twin boy, if when they say they call that name, you automatically know that is the firstborn, first twin, and the first twin, and then you can write a story about that, isn't it? So even the other way around is true, that if you have the contents, you can give a name to represent those contents, and that's about the title. Okay. Yes, I don't know whether we will say this, but when you submit an article to a journal, even if that journal is very disappointing, it's taking too long, don't submit to another journal without withdrawing or requesting that you withdraw from the other journal. If you submit, at the same time in two journals, you will be caught up with the breaching ethics of publication. Okay. Okay, so to summarize, from a thesis, from a proposal, you have the problem statement, the problem structure, you have done analysis, and from the problem you have selected what to do for a thesis, and then from the thesis you have results and select the results for which you decide to write a publication. So the scope of information is actually reducing as you move from one step to the other. And you are actually becoming more technical as you move from the proposal down to the paper. Now, the difference between a journal article and proceedings, it is more of the level of peer review and amount of information included in a given paper. But when we publish in proceedings, we don't publish again because there is only one public for whom we are beaming out this information. However, you can adjust the table so that it has maybe transformed data, which you can now step up into the journal article. I think I'll stop. I stop here. This one. This is mouse. It is study.
Yes. Unless there's a question, you can just continue.
Okay, is there a question? This is a
Yes.
preamble. What
I
I've
can
said
see-
is a preamble to starting writing, because now we are going to start writing.
Yes, I can see three hands. They are up.
Okay.
The first one
Actually,
is from
there are four hands. There are four
four
hands.
hands. Okay.
Yes.
So,
We have
the first
Can you
one-
get closer to the mic?
Zanele Nisibi.
Sorry, we
Zanele,
can't hear
please go
you.
ahead.
Please get closer to the
Zanele,
mic.
talk. You can
Hello?
go ahead.
Do you hear me?
Zanel, are you with us?
Yes, yes. Can you
Please
hear
go
me?
ahead. If you have question, comment, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is on yes. My question is after you have had your article, where do you get the reviewers from? The accredited reviewers? Is it after you submit your paper that the journal gives you the reviewers to go through your paper, or you have to get them yourselves from trusted reviewers, probably someone you may know? Because I had an issue with one of my articles that I sent to one professor who claimed to be a reviewer, and he sold this article, unfortunately, to someone else. And I saw this article being published. It was an unfortunate issue for me, but I'm pretty much sensitive now So I want to know where to get these accredited reviewers from to actually go through my paper before submitting, or is it the journal that gives you the reviewers to read your article to let it pass through?
Just hold on. We are adjusting our.
No, Amitu, can you re-echo that question because we just didn't hear?
Can I repeat the question?
Yeah, please do.
Yes, please.
Yes, I will just speak slowly so that it's well captured. So now you have your article, you have written your article, it's ready to send to the journal. Where do you get the reviewers from? Like people to read your article before it gets published so that you have feedback, comments, where you can correct where it needs to be corrected? Is it the journal itself that gives you the reviewers to go through your article, to read it, to proofread it? The proofreaders, with like that.
If I hear you correctly, you were speaking about
Proofreader.
reviewer.
Yes, because I had an issue with one. Yes, because I had an issue with one of my articles I sent to a professor who claimed to be a reviewer, but he sold this article to someone else and it was published, unfortunately.
Sold the article to someone else. But
Yes.
now,
Yes.
when you're submitting a journal article, there is a process of submission. You submit to the journal, not to the professor.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't submit a paper to individuals. You submit a paper to a journal. And then the journal has a process of handling. These days, even journals do this online, so you are able to track that the manuscript was received. It has gone through the final screening stage. It has been assigned reviewers. The first review has sent comments. You are able to see all this, and you are able to track and see the actions taken by the editor, section editor, and the editor-in-chief.
Okay, I think it was a mistake on my
submission
side.
should not be to individuals. Sorry?
I think it was a mistake on my side because I thought I
Yeah.
could send it to an individual to read it for me.
And there are so many cracks out there.
Oh, okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So can we continue, please?
We can continue, but there was I think, hand up here from Paulino Ludu. Maybe as just a question or comment.
Yes.
Paulino, are you with
yes.
us?
Yeah, good afternoon, bro.
Good afternoon. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. My question is on the research gap, like will the young writers, sometimes we find difficult and you find yourself struggling to get what is new and what is missing in the topic. Now, how will you help us or advise us to find out the research gaps in the topic that one targets to do?
Okay, this is what we are talking about. We are now going to go step by step, because when you select your data and then line it up, you're selecting data that is promising news. And as a student, you are soaked into your field. I don't know what your field is, but it could be coming from post-harvest, from biochemistry, from agriculture economics, from agribusiness, from rural development. So within the context of your discipline,
Sorry.
You understand that which
That's
is
what I
new,
was saying.
and you understand the
But I can
contribution
read it
to
for you.
knowledge.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah,
Do you get us? This is
yeah,
why
I'm
it is
getting.
called actually peer review. That the peers in a given discipline, soil science, agronomy, are speaking to each other, and they understand what the knowledge gaps are, what has been produced, what has not been produced. They understand what the contribution is to knowledge. So in scholarly writing, scientific writing, we are talking about contribution to knowledge, and we are definitely filling a gap. We did research because there was need to find out. And now we are at a stage of publishing that which we have found out.
Wonderful.
Is this okay?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for.
Okay, thank you too. There is a hand up for Paulino. Can you allow Paulino to say something before we continue?
I was
He's the one
just.
who just asked.
Okay,
So maybe,
okay.
maybe I can allow Robert to talk.
Okay.
Please, Robert, go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. My name is Robert Wamusi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now.
Yes, my name is Robert Wamusi, a very, very young researcher. I started doing my research
They
last
call
year.
Robert.
Robert. You said Robert.
Started doing my
Robert.
Did you
yes,
say
yes.
Robert?
Robert.
Yes, I started doing my research last year and had a few publications here and there on different articles. But again, when the Professor Paul was saying in the beginning, when I had just joined, he did say that when you're writing a manuscript, you will write and the title will always come either in the 10th position, if I may recall well, the presentation. Are you relating to when I've done my scientific research? Maybe I did my master's research and I'm trying to pick my points to align them to a particular article so that I will generate my title from there. Or if I'm writing a review article, I imagine I should be having a title ready that will guide me to go through that review article. So maybe you do some clarification on that, because I'm a little bit puzzled up. What exactly are you trying to mean?
No.
Thanks.
We have explained that having a title ready is a recipe for confusion, because you will have everything jumbled up and you will be struggling to satisfy that title. The title comes at the bottom. What you need to have ready is your data, and then from your data, you work out an objective that corresponds to that data that you've selected. And the data that you've selected is newsworthy data. So what is the news? And that the title should be speaking to that news.
Does this
You
apply to
probably
both?
did soil analysis in a given area. Now, soil
Okay.
analysis is not news. Everyone is analyzing soil. But what is new is the new discoveries that you have found in that soil. So now your title should be microorganism XX first discovery in the region. Then you now move on with the data that shows that discovery. And that title will come at the end.
Well,
not
that
at the
I pick it
beginning.
well. Yes, well, that I pick it well. But now my emphasis, the puzzle here is, how about if you are doing review articles? Because the review articles, you go and review
Now,
different scholars and come up with something. Do you still do the same thing you're saying?
yes, it is the same. If you're doing review articles, a review article starts with a question. So you
Yes.
have a question, and that question is what helps you to get an objective and the data that you're going to analyze. Okay.
All right.
So let's continue. If you can allow us continue.
Okay.
I think we finished this. You finished this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
getting started.
Okay, so let's continue to the next slide. Please go ahead.
Okay, when you start with the title, it means that everything else that will be written must satisfy the title. But there's no magic. There's no magic with that title. How did you decide on it? And many of your professors will say, bring topics for your research. That's more of a gamble. And the best the title can do is to hold your hands so that you write about it and take away the flexibility of knowledge creation. So otherwise, it's good to create the content and then give it a name. Okay? All right, now let's get started. We now assume. Oh, I think you. This one. Hello, we can't screen share. We don't know why we can't screen share.
Because you're already sharing the screen. Are you sharing from Professor JS machine?
Yes,
or
from Professor JS.
You have to first stop yours.
Yeah, I stopped mine. Mine is not showing.
It is showing. Okay, let me
No,
stop it for you.
you stop it.
Can you maybe stop the one of Professor JS?
No, let me stop yours. Yours is still showing.
And it's showing a blank.
I will stop
Now stop.
yours. Now Prof JS can go ahead to share.
We are having participants who are saying they can't hear.
I think they must be having network challenges, because if we can hear, the facilitators, they are also connected through the internet. So if you can't hear, it means others are saying they can hear, meaning those who can't hear, it's a network problem. You see in the chat, a number of many people are saying they are hearing.
This is where you are.
Okay.
Okay, we can now get started. We said at this stage, we start with the results. And now the assumptions here are that a study was conducted. This one? Yes, this is on. Go with this. It's okay. A study was conducted following the rules of scientific research. Well designed, scientifically premised. Yes, and that means the science was put in order, and that the study, for example, was replicated sufficiently, repeated. For example, agronomy studies. These days, if you do it for one season, you don't expect a publication from that. Normally, you go for at least 2 seasons. But even with the two seasons, when one is short, the other one is long, the seasons can't be reproduced. The best you can do probably is to irrigate the short season so that you are able to compare with the long season. Otherwise, you need to repeat the seasons. If you did long season, repeat long season 3 times. Don't say I did short season and long season. Those are now already different, and the results will have to be different. So if you are going to get the means, those means will represent neither of the two seasons. Okay? So the assumption here is that everything about the study was done correctly. And now what we are seeing are effects of the treatments. We have minimized any other variation and amplified the treatment effects. And then we are also assuming that the authors, the people who are going to write, are competitive in the basic statistics, or at least the statistics of means and standard errors and LSD and Duncan's multiple range test, that kind of thing. They know what it means and how to use them. Okay? Standard errors and so on and so forth. Because those are the things we are going to use in the understanding and interpreting the results. For humanities, what should it be? Social sciences, what kind of statistics should they know?
Quantitative, computer linked, computer assisted,
thematic,
qualitative analysis.
thematic what?
Oh, thematic analysis.
Thematic analysis,
content analysis.
Content analysis, this kind of thing. You should be very flexible with and even more. Okay. Yes, and then you have the most effective illustrations. That is tables, figures, and so on and so forth. And this is considering that the saying that one good or one effective illustration replaces 1,000 words. How is it to say? There's a saying like that.
Yeah, one picture represents 1,000.
One picture represented 1,000 words. So instead of writing 1,000 words, just put there a picture. That should be the principle governing which figure to use or which table to use, or you should go for a photograph. So that somebody, you don't waste time explaining the lady was seated like this, then she held a child like this, then the child was circling, then, the photo will just show automatically. And then you'll have just to dress it up with what it doesn't show. Okay? Now, these are the suggested steps, assuming all those I have said are okay. And now you have the illustrations, the data, and now you want to write a paper. First of all, you can use the objective or one of the objectives in the project or thesis and identify what we are calling segments here. But I think rather go to the results, look through them, and see numbers that they look contradictory to what is known. For example, there's a contradiction. They are taking a trend, a pattern of contradiction to what is known. But remember, we have done all the research following the correct principles that are generally accepted by our discipline. But now the numbers are showing that instead of going to the right, the response is going to the right, is going to the left. That kind of this illustration would have a high potential for a journal paper, because then you are going to explain something new, and many people avoid that kind of explanation, and they panel beat their data so that they follow the same trend as those of other previous researchers, and that's where we lose it, because your results are saying something new, but you are trying to avoid it because you don't want to explain and to be accused of saying a wrong thing. Okay? So, what am I saying? I'm saying go for a table or a figure which has contradictions, for example. Or the table is talking about the efficiency of a certain tool, and capitalize your paper on that efficiency. Bring it out and see how it relates to the objective, how it can improve the way things are going to be done in order to answer to the original problems in a given community. So we are not saying like, okay, we now have this objective of a project, let us write a paper for it. That will be a passive document, and nobody wants to. It's more like accountability to say, yes, we wrote some papers from, but the journal you are going for will be of some kind of lower level, where everything can be published, and probably the readers will be very few. The reader index is going to be, even the journal's, reader index will be very low, because you are publishing what is already known. Okay? But remember, I said earlier on that you can organize to ensure that you actually have papers from your research by addressing questions that have no answers. So in other words, if you are saying this is the objective, turn it into a question. If the answer is 50% available, or 60, or 70, I would not go for that kind of research. Or if I have to, like these days, the utility, the application of research to people's problems is pressured very much by donors, and I build in some questions that have no answers. And those are the questions that I give to my postgraduate students to work on. Okay? So now we have evaluated our data illustrations, and we have identified some potential illustrations from which we can build a story, a research story. Now, if we have decided, okay, now this is the set, but the set has data saying different things. Then we go one at a time, because remember we said one message at a time for each article. One message. So we concentrate on one and begin deriving an objective from it, and organize, look through the other tables and figures, and any table that has something to do with what we have identified should be lined up. The order may come later on, but we line them up. Okay? And then, because the objective we have formulated is linked with the proposal problem that was addressed, the whole story is now it's in line, it's continuous. The message is derived from the proposal. So we can as well start interpreting the results or writing about the result, the data in the illustrations. Hello?
Yes, Professor. Some they are saying that the slide is not moving. So maybe you need to check from your part.
Because you're talking to that slide.
The slides are not the issue because we are going to give them to you. Yeah, let me
Thank you so
move.
much.
Talking to the slides.
Okay. So I said select illustrations and line them up behind that illustration that you picked, and that fall behind the objective. And then now write an interpretation in form of a story linked or guided by the objective. So everything now we are writing is going to be governed, guided by the objective. We don't want to call it a specific objective because we don't have a main objective in an article. So it is the only objective. Okay? Write a story, and we want to call it a research story. And this story has everything to do with you. There's no literature here we are using. Okay? So okay, how to guide it is, how did this parameter respond to the treatment? Maybe there was no response. If the analysis is saying no significant differences or no significant effect, and when there is no significant effect, although we write it in the results, we don't follow up explaining why there was no significant effect, because that's a waste of time, I mean. However, when the lack of significant effect is a contradiction to the known theories and whatever, you may need later on to continue explaining, especially when you are in the discussion. Why did it happen like that? But if it has no effect, nobody is worried about why there was no significant effect, you indicate the response of this to the treatment was not significant, and it all ends there. However, the response to this and this was highly significant, and now the interest is in the effect, which was significant. And now we need to tell how significant. Very high, 10 times the whatever, you normally have a control, a reference point. So we begin now telling the structure and the magnitude of the differences. And of course, then when it comes to discussion, of course, we are trying to, because this story flows through, then we want to ask the questions like, why was it significant? What caused it? So what? As far as the objective is yeah, the objective has its own deliverables. So what as far as the deliverables of the objectives are concerned? How does existing literature contextualize what we have seen? If existing literature is showing something different, then we have to give a speculation. We don't leave it at that. Speculate what could be, and then finally suggest what needs to be done in order to complete the story. Okay. And at that point, you can ask yourself, is there a sub-conclusion or sub-conclusion we can, for the time being, put here? Therefore, in Kenya, under these circumstances, if you have to increase the performance of peas, you need to do A, B, C, D. That's a sub-conclusion. The totality of which can be taken to feed into the conclusion. Many people will reach the conclusion section and ask themselves, what should I write about the conclusion? It becomes now a new story, as if you are just beginning to think about what to write. Okay, so from this slide, think of a story. And a story has characteristics. One, it has a beginning and an end. And it flows smoothly. It starts with old, ends with the new. Within the story, you have those milestones, the paragraphs, the old is feeding into the new. That's how the smoothness ends. Okay? And there is logic in what you are saying. You don't want to be talking about grain yield before germination. That's the sort of thing. Because actually, even science flows. If you trace science, it flows from seed to germination, to seedling something, to flowering, to so we want to follow that. And then finally say, for example, if that pattern was evident, but at flowering, the response dropped, then we know the focus is at flowering. And if anybody is to continue to achieve what we were trying to do, they must tackle flowering. And what aspect of flowering do we see here that should be pursued? Okay. Yes. Now, you remember yesterday I said offload, you have a lot of information in your head, part of which is not even part of this work. But you want to offload the aspects that belong to this work on paper. Doesn't matter how it looks. It might look very funny. Actually, your neighbor might think you are running mad because there's nothing you are writing about. But in yourself, you'll feel like there is a big luggage removed from you. Okay? But when you offload everything. Don't offload 20% and hope to continue tomorrow, because the tomorrow might be next month. And by the time you get back to the drawing board, the mind is already thinking about something else, and the story is lost. And many people give up at that point, because trying to recall why you put this, why. So every time you offload everything, and preferably dot to the end, and indicate what at the end what you wanted to see, you were looking at. Okay. Then you can even take a month and then come back and refine. But writing that is intermittent by long periods is not smooth and not quite interesting. And many people give up along the way, because there are many other better inspiring things to do. Doing the routine is always better than being challenged with thinking and creating knowledge. So it is best to work within a short time, in a quiet environment. You doze, you wake up, you doze, you don't go away. You have to concentrate. And when you do, your work will be excellent and you'll be in charge, no doubt. So keep refining the document, give it to friends, colleagues in your area, especially those who have competence. Let them read, give you feedback. Most of them will be wishing to pull you down, of course, as giving you very hard questions, but in the process, you are actually evolving into a very good scientist. You will never be the same before those questions. Okay? You may. Okay, let me rewind a bit. So we started with the results. We are writing about them. We might be writing without the discussion. We are only saying this responded like this, then this, and when it reached this point, it dropped. And we are not giving a dry narrative, because if it is scientific, you are giving supportive information, maybe dropped by 20%, maybe you are giving with the empirical data to support what you are saying. Okay? Now, when it comes to the discussion, again, the list of data points is different. It's now the why. So what? How can we leverage from it to better solve the problem? What does literature say? You see, those questions are different. And when you write them and keep them, your write-up will be very, very nice, very systematic. And for those of you who are writing theses, that's the way to go. It's not true that all the questions will apply to every section, but keep varying them from there and try not to run away from some. They might be very difficult, but when you think through, that knowledge created will be the news in your paper. Okay? You may, at this time, this is your work, you are thinking all the time. You may create a draft title, just a draft title. But when I read the title, I'm able to link it to the objective and to the conclusions, even if you don't tell me. I can reliably predict the objective and the conclusions. So you can see, if the title is written before the objective and the conclusions, it's likely to take a different direction, different from your results. You might never meet your results, actually. And similarly, if the introduction is written before the results, you might end up with something else that never touches the results. Okay? Okay. I don't know whether I should stop and before we go to an example here. Do you have some questions or lessons to share? Maybe two, three.
Yes, please. There are some hands up. The first one is Jerusa. Please, Jerusa, can you talk something? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, please. Okay. Course I can see your hand is up. Course, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay.
But again, I was wondering what you go for. There is a result in the JP and then there is no base. Good deliverables.
Yes, Jerus, can you hear me?
You're very far away from your computer.
Okay, I wanted to add a comment on starting.
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, on starting the manuscript, I normally prefer starting from what you have already in your work, what you are working on, and then you are writing. You start from what you have, and then you develop out of that what you want to write. Yeah.
Of course, there are many styles. What we are giving is one of the effective styles.
Okay.
And when you become seasoned to writing, you can start from anywhere.
Yeah, with anything that you have in the work you are doing. Yeah, that's where I always start from.
And you realize that as you write the materials and methods, you might hit an idea that relates with the conclusion. So you write that conclusion. I mean, that's a statement reserved for the conclusion, really.
Yeah.
So this becomes a game that you can play around with. And
Yeah,
it has
and
no one point to start.
Yeah, and the impact of your work will be directly a result of how the publishers or the journals will react to. Mostly after you present something, that is when you know that the impact is high. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right.
I can see another hand here from Sophie. Sophie, please go ahead.
So now it is already published, but we didn't give.
Sophie, can you hear me? There is another hand. Let me try Gideon.
But I wanted to engage me.
Gideon, please. Do you have something to?
We wanted, in fact,
to say?
Something on that, but I want to push it because I know we can have like just discussion since I'm not
Or what?
It more faster.
Or do you have something to ask or to comment?
I will.
I have a question.
Okay, please. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Anselme Ruhumuriza from the University of Rwanda. I'm actually a junior researcher. I completed my master's last year. But throughout the conversations that you have been taking us through, I got a concern regarding literature review and the nature of the new news. Basically, we are told that we should refer to the literature review, provided that everything, maybe the topic that we want to write about was written about. And I wonder, how should I make sure that the gaps, the news that I want to provide are the pure news? Because maybe I want to write on something, maybe a refugee status in East Africa or maybe Great Lakes region. And it actually has been written about. How should I make sure that the news I want to provide like the topics?
Well, you have to search for that information as far as possible until you reach a saturation point. You called it what?
Saturation. Data saturation.
Data saturation point. That's the point at which the next article is saying the same thing that you have already identified in the previous articles. So when you reach that, then read it through and see whether what you have has anything to do with what you want to write about. Okay? And
Okay.
literature review, I think we will talk about it at some point. But although what you write is literature about past publications, the way you style yourself and the way you identify gaps and the way you suggest what should be done and so on, and the way you document what is available, that's the news in your literature review. So the more you put in your own acumen, or I don't know how to put it, the more you put original information in there, and that's the news. But many people will just keep patching statements from here and there and there and there, and that's literature review. No, no way. That's the student type of literature review in your thesis, I'm sure. We want to see how things are flowing, how they should be flowing, the weaknesses, the strengths, the SWOT analysis, so to say. And then we want you to come out with the balance and then suggest where do we go? What should be the new agenda for this kind of work? That's the news. But if you are going to patch statements and not even paraphrasing, the paraphrasing means, okay, you read and then put it in your own words, the way you understand it, but without distorting the meaning, because otherwise you're attributing something to a citation that has nothing to do with what you are saying, and that's wrong. Have I answered your question?
Thank you very much, Prof. I've answered.
So, are we done with the questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. Yes, my name is Alex Ukut from Ministry of Agriculture, also a student at Makerere, enrolling for PhD in soil science. My question is about the issue of literature. I know there is always need for backup literature on the subject matter that you want to talk about. But how do we present new findings which has never been discovered anywhere? Of recent, we all had the incidence of coronavirus when people were coming out with vaccines, and these vaccines never existed before, but they had to be invented to address a crisis. Now, in the line of agriculture, there may be a new discovery on a condition that is unique to a tropical environment, and most of our publications have been publications from outside Uganda. How do we address this?
Well, I hope I've got the question, but even before the language of publication, people were discovering things and informing the rest, especially those that were concerned with some of the solutions they needed. So although we say literature, I mean, if you are informing me about a drug that works, I don't need to know literature unless you are substantiating what you are saying. You want to convince me that this is not coming from out of the blue, but it is quite well connected with the principles of science. Otherwise, you can inform me without necessarily going to literature. And that kind of information may not really be for the journal right away. It might be information for other outlets. But finally, then you can refine it for a journal. I don't know whether I'm answering the question.
Yeah, but maybe just to contribute to that, you know, yesterday we said that new knowledge is built on old knowledge. If you're talking about an epidemic, in 1913, there was an epidemic. The influenza virus came as an epidemic long ago. For those of you who are talking about potato, there was that challenge, potato late blight, that wiped out potato in Europe. And it was a challenge that's why we call it the Irish potato, because it caused famine in Ireland. Now, epidemics are known.
So,
Yes, and cassava, whatever. So even where you think there is no literature, if you're talking about beans and you're saying this is the first disease that I have found, then there are legumes that relate to beans. Maybe something happened in soybean. If you're talking about communities for people in social sciences, I mean, if you're talking about pygmies and their behavior, there are pygmies in India. There are pygmies in the Himalayas. So how do these relate? So this thing of saying no literature, nothing exists, is not a scholarly arrangement, because new knowledge builds on old knowledge. And there are some books that say that there is nothing new under the sun. Yeah, and indeed there is nothing new. What we think is new is because we don't know, and so we do research. Yeah, but otherwise it exists. So we search on what exists. And so we have points of reference that are guiding spots that we need to refer to. Yeah.
okay. I think we need to continue.
Yeah, please.
Hello?
Please continue.
Please,
We continue?
we can go on, but there was a question. I don't know if, with your permission, maybe we can just ask one. And
Okay, please go
yes,
ahead.
please. Alan, please. I can see your hand. Go ahead. Alan, can you hear me?
Hello, good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Alan Marungudze from Zimbabwe. I'm currently a lab analyst, and there is a project that we are currently doing, and we published it with the SASTA platform, and it has been listed under the short communication, of which we submitted a full paper, and some of the projects have also been categorized as posters. So what criteria are they using to degrade papers into short communication into posters, and what criteria do they really use to degrade some of these papers? Thank you.
It's not really degrading. Those are different forms of communication. Some of them are based on the substantiality of the data you have and the extent to which you have gone with the study. Paul talked about a study, maybe developing varieties. That might take you about 5 years to get a variety. But along the way, you are getting certain things completed. Maybe you had a protocol which was not working well, but now you have fixed it and you want to give it to the public, first of all, to know that there's something new, and then secondly, to use it. So that would be called a short communication, depending on the amount of data you have behind it. If you have substantial data, it can go for a full paper. Okay. So this work is about variety, but you are getting offshoots that you can give away. And I think it is most common with the biotechnology. Although I don't hear about it very much, but there was a lot of news about biotechnology. It was growing. And if you did not publish what you have found today, tomorrow you'll find that somebody else is publishing it. So that you catch the eye of the public, you had to publish this very quickly. And sometimes it's not even complete very well. That would be a short publication. Now, also depending on the audience or depending on the program, like if you have a conference, a big congress, and time is not going to be enough, you would be encouraged rather at least to show your work by way of a poster. By way of a poster, rather than missing, because time for presentation might not be sufficient for all the papers. So if it is recommended for a poster, it's because there's not enough time to accommodate it as a substantial presentation. Okay? So, but ideally, if it is going to be a full paper or a short communication, the peer review is going to be quite vigorous. Quite vigorous. And also, if it is not so highly technical, the audience will be a less technical audience. And then a poster might be good enough for you to pass on the message. So I don't know. I think there are different circumstances that drive people to publish or to have things the way they want them published. And if you don't want your work published by poster, then you have to wait to make it substantial so that you publish it as an article. Maybe somebody else can add, or what do you think?
What on the issue of short communications, and we are going to share a very interesting write-up on posters and how important these are in terms of scientific dissemination of information. A poster can reach 1,000 people, while a journal article may be reaching 300 people. So posters are very important in dissemination of scientific information, and they can even be uploaded on websites, and they stay for forever and ever for viewership. The tendency is that scholars look at these as a subgrade, but they are not. And similarly, a short communication is only a short communication because it is communicating a step in the research process. So it is not communicating the entire process. If you're developing a vaccine, you have to follow 6 steps in drug development. So if you're successful with step 1, you publish that information, but you have not yet given us the vaccine. So that step 1 that you've communicated is called a short communication.
Okay? Hello?
Yes, thank you so much.
No, it is not safe.
I think now we can continue.
Okay, here is an example, but it's more to do with the biological experiment. But as we present and discuss, of course, there will be circumstances that fit other areas or disciplines. So here is a study which involved groundnuts and French beans. And these were the legumes, each intercropped with the sorghum. Intercropped with the sorghum. And this was in Kenya. Because we are talking about reality, we have to disclose some of these locations so that maybe the Kenyans feel good about it. Okay? Now I'm going to change a bit. Here, when we presented this slide, we said you can derive your objective by looking at the part of the specific objective of your project or thesis that touches the results you have selected. But I want to change a bit and say that you can design an objective without looking at the other objectives, but having the research problem in mind. You remember you designed a proposal, you wrote, there was water. So what we are doing here is linked to that. So by looking through your results that make news, you develop a statement or statements, bullets, that can be turned around into a smart objective. Okay? Now, smart objectives they use action words rather than process words. Okay? To increase awareness, for example, increase awareness of a certain community about the efficacy of a certain plant, something like plant pesticide. So increase, that means the results should show increase, but they can also show decrease. And in there we have a control, a standard control against which we see increase or decrease. Okay? But the objective, according to the project, the objective was to improve agronomic performance and economic value of sorghum legume intercrops. Improve agronomic performance and economic value of sorghum legume intercrops in Western Kenya. Now, you remember we said each paper should have one message. And here we have two messages. Improve agronomic performance as a message, and then economic value as another message. So we don't recommend that you combine the two, because this is about economics, the other one is about agronomy. And most likely the two will go to different journals. Okay? They will go to different journals. Now, the treatments which you had probably was for agronomic improvement was row arrangement. That is one row to one row. That is one row of sorghum and one row of either groundnuts or peas, French peas. And in Kenya, I think they call that imbili. Imbili means two. One or two to two. And then the other treatment is orientation of the rows, east, west, and in north-south, or south-north, whatever. And then the other treatment was any rates. That means the fertilizer, which was based on nitrogen, had those rates. In other words, these treatments are going to be interactive. They'll be interactive in the plots. Okay. Now, the thing is to be measured to find out how the treatments are influencing the plant is solar radiation, because within an intercrop, light is an issue. The taller crop is likely to affect the shorter crop. So we want to see whether those treatment combinations will have influenced solar radiation, and we know if solar radiation is influenced, photosynthesis will be influenced, and ultimately the yield of one of the crops might be affected. Okay. Then plant height for both intercrops, number of pods per plant for the legume, leaf area index, time of flowering, biological nitrogen fixation for legumes, time to maturity for both, number of seeds, I think there are even more, 100 seed weight. I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of these. These are routine measurements. Panicle size, this is repeated. Protein content, days to harvesting, and so on. Total grain yield. Okay. Now, from the economics standpoint, information collected will have to do with the farm gate prices, input costs, including labor and agrochemicals and seeds and water and watering and so on, transportation, and so on and so forth. Then there might be another objective on awareness in the thesis, when talking about the thesis or the project report. In this case, awareness is dissemination, and it is not a researchable area. Well, it's researchable, but when the objective is to create awareness, it means you already have the information to use. So, for agronomy, we would have a paper that combines both. One paper, and then another paper for the sorghum French beans. Okay. And then economics, we have one for groundnut sorghum and the other one French beans sorghum. So those are already 4 papers. And then we can have relative performance of common beans. How can I close this? Yeah, performance of beans, sorghum, and French bean. A paper that compares the two intercropping systems. Because at the end of the day, maybe we want to recommend to a farmer which combination works best for them. So we have a paper that now is comparing those two. Okay, so when we talk about results, we are talking about the tables, figures, and other illustrations along with a narrative story that is saying what the data are saying as far as the treatments are concerned or treatment effects are concerned. Okay? And as I said earlier, readers prefer the text to numbers. And therefore, numbers should be used as evidence to support what the author is saying. Now, because we have a variety of illustrations, their effectiveness also vary. And their use depends on the readership, the people who are going to read this paper. If we are targeting university professors and researchers in institutions, we may not hesitate to use tables and figures like bar graphs and whatever. But we have to be careful as we use photographs and other things. But as literacy levels decrease, we tend to go away from tables and use simple figures, pie charts, for example, bars, and then photographs work very well. If you are going to present to farmers, you are not putting too much text, because one, they may not be literate. Two, their lifestyle is not about reading. But when the farmer sees this large watermelon, he will be attracted to find out what you used to get that watermelon and how he could get the resources to grow that type of watermelon. But if the message is in the text and tables, you can as well forget. You are not communicating. Okay? Now, even scientific or scholarly papers, you should know that you have news, you have information to communicate. And it is best if you can use the best language, best style that will communicate this message without distorting the contents, the sequence, the logic, the completeness. Find out how best you can do that. Of course, the best would have been a cultural something, but scholars don't have that time. But they entertain reading. But scientific scholars don't have a lot of time, even the capacity to digest large texts. They don't have that. So if you want to communicate to a scientist, make it as short as possible and easy to digest. Short sentences, short words, very simple common words in their language as a discipline. Don't use jargons, because then they will have to try to find out what that jargon means. And the jargon might mean different things to different people. Okay? And the narrative, and this is very important, the text is not about reproducing what is in the table or figure, for heaven's sake. And when you present a table, don't present it as a figure again in the same paper. That's wrong. You are wasting space. Use the figure or the table that brings out what you are trying to talk about immediately and in completeness. Okay? Now, scholars would like to verify what you are saying. That's why we emphasize significant differences, and there's a measure of significant difference. Put it there so that they see. And this is where we sometimes fail, using those error bars and the LSD and Duncan's multiple range test, some of which are criticized. We need to be seasoned to know that certain measures of differences are criticized. And you don't want to go for that, because instead of somebody reading to understand your work, they are busy criticizing the way you have written it. Okay? Now, the interpretation is information that is not appearing in the table and figure. It's the in-between figure information. For example, you have a table, but it's not showing the trend clearly. So you want to link the data to the reader to see the trend. Decreasing, then increasing, then against the control. Okay? You are not saying exactly what is in the table, but you are adding value to those numbers, but also using the numbers to give evidence, supportive evidence to your argument. Which argument started with the proposal? We need to address this problem, find a solution, and you are going through the results and discussion to find the answer to those problems you first of all raised in the proposal. Okay? So the narrative text, the interpretation, so to say, is to add more information to make the reader understand better the results. And the more capacity you have to do this, the more you control the reader, not to look about mistakes, about you capture the reader's attention and mind and focus to follow the way you are thinking, the way you perceive about this particular problem that is under discussion. And if you have a very good capacity, the reader would not like to attend to a phone call before completing what they are reading. And that's the capacity we need to acquire by writing and writing and reading and writing and submitting, and become resistant to some of these degrading review reports. Okay. Yeah, this is what I was. A good illustration is one that replaces a significant amount of text. But there are also illustrations which will attract even more text. And this is true of fine art. I think for them, they consider a good photo picture as one that will be showing something else next time you look at it. Every time you look at it, you are seeing something else hidden. No, we don't want that. Rather, we want one that will take away the text so that somebody makes an impression right away. And if it has been able to do that, why should you repeat what it has already showed? Why? Well, graphs are simpler than tables. And you know, like breeders will have very comprehensive tables, 200 lines, and then they have these columns, I don't know, very many things about the variety, and then the insects, pests. One way to do it is to classify those lines into poor performing based on the results you have, and then medium, and then extra something, and present them either in one table, taking just a few representatives, and that's good enough to represent 200 lines. For tables that need supplementary information, then you put the details as accompanying documents to the manuscript. Okay, but also you can have several tables coming from one comprehensive table by taking a few related columns against this standard, whatever the independence, the lines. So you get like 3 tables from one table. But then you are bound to get too many tables. So at some point of assessing the relevance of a table to the topic you have decided, some of the tables that are peripherally relevant can be abandoned. Leave them. Okay? Otherwise, data in the graphs are easier to understand than those in the tables. Quite easier. But a scholarly person is okay with the table. It's okay. The problem with some illustrations like pie chart, there's no way you are going to compare your statistics in a pie chart. So a pie chart normally is the last to be presented in the results because it is summarizing for somebody who is less literate to see what to get, and also attracting those that are scholars to read, because when you see this summary, you then expect the details inside and you can go further to read. Well, so some of these are, the last bullet is the caution that you have to title every illustration, give it a title. And many people will give them titles that don't make sense. The title must relate to the problem you are addressing, and probably you can even anchor it to a location. If the problem you're addressing is specific to Uganda, why not say it? And those who have known that problem in Uganda will relate to it very fast. Okay. An example of an illustration: enhancing production in goat crop systems through improved feeding management and utilization of organic resources for cabbage production. I wish we were interacting physically. I think somebody would have to stand and tell us the merits and the demerits of that kind of title. But I can take the advantage and tell you that if you look at the graph represented by that title, there are certain things you are not going to see. For example, the goat crop systems are not there on the graph. Feeding management is not there. And the cabbage production is not evident in this graph. So that title has a weakness. Okay. If we had time, one of you would
The
give
title of the graph.
would give it a more representative title. But also, if you look at inside the graph, first of all, let's look at the axis. The x-axis is talking about number of goats. And the y-axis is talking about income over time. Okay? And it is saying the more the goats, the more the income. Do you want to believe that? First of all, you see the graph representing goats. It is constant, but the income is increasing. So the relationship is not correctly represented. The more the goats, the more the income. But the graph is showing the goats are remaining the same and the income is increasing. So that means there's another factor coming into play, which is not being represented by the title. Yes, this is one of the graphs I was talking about. For example, readers, but I think this one is an entomologist study. Effect. Yes, effect of pesticide schedules or regimes on insect pests on citrus trees during June to October 2002 in the upper Midland something Machakos district. That's in Kenya again. Transformations as squares and so on and so forth. That title again is a mouthful and could be made shorter. But the problem is that the table is comprehensive. Now, the use of a table or a figure is to help the reader very quickly look through and justify the text the author is presenting. But in this table, I'm not sure whether the reader will make an effort to trace what the author is saying. But on the other hand, it's difficult to believe that the author will make sense out of this table. That is necessary for a publication in a journal. So this table only represents the inability of the author to manage their data, first of all. Okay. So as I said, we could theme sets of this data. And when we theme, you realize that that theme cannot apply to all the columns. Because in some columns, it will be higher and then lower and then. So that means we need to disaggregate these columns and get columns, tables that will deliver the sense that we would want, or that the sense that is coming out of them. And you can imagine under treatments, you have those abbreviations. You make sense out of them. I mean, you can't remember what is what. Of course, you will call for a footnote, which will be very long. very long and confusing. Okay? And as you can see, the mean separation is likely to have been Duncan's multiple range test, AB, H, ABC, and so on. Now, if you just look through the table, which one would have been the best? For example, for aphids, which is the largest number? And larger than what? We have the control down there. But which is the largest number? It will take you a whole day trying to look through this to make sense. And when you make sense, the sense will be for you and not for the reader. And remember, the success of our writing and communication is when the reader is convinced with what we are saying and is able to repeat, for example, what we presented to him and get similar results. And that can't be in this case. Yeah. Yeah, most of these I have covered. What you are talking about in the interpretation is what the reader cannot see in the table or in the figure or what. And actually, the interpretation is the thread representing the objective through the document. I don't know whether that makes sense to you. When your article has an objective, that objective is the backbone, right from the title through up to conclusion. That's why we said the objective guides your writing. The guides in terms of direction, where you should go, and in terms of size or width, how far away you can go from the center of the document. Okay. Yes. Like Paul said, when we are presenting the results, we don't put citations. We don't put explanations. We don't put answers to things like, so what? No? And the so what question will quickly lead you to a citation. So once you see that, you know you are now mixing up discussion with the results. But if you have chosen to do results and discussion, then when you present results, you can discuss them. You can discuss pieces of results about a parameter. For example, yield or grain yield. You present the 100 seed yield and then discuss that. Then present under grain yield. Then the total yield, present that. Then compare what you get for total yield against 100 seed yield. Okay. Okay. Yes. Although we are saying you are discussing the results and interpretation, depending on the guidelines of the journal, you may be asked not to include the illustrations within the text. However, every time you refer to data which are in an illustration, the first time you refer to them, put in brackets the illustration. Or you can start with illustrate, you can say table 10 presents results for da 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 da. Or you can say results for this da, 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 are presented in table 10. Or you can write that this was more effective than this in bracket table 10. What I'm trying to say is even when you are writing results, you don't have to have monotony of repeating the same table 10, table 9, table 1. No. You need to keep varying a bit so that the reader is not bored while reading. Okay? Now, in the results, the first statement normally refers to where the results are. And in the discussion section, the first statement under every parameter, you remember we said each parameter measured becomes a subtitle. Okay? Now, the first statement of the discussion of that parameter also shows where the results are. And it is pointing to the results presented in the results section. The first statement is answering to the first statement in the discussion is linked to the first statement in the results. And it goes on like that throughout. But when you are on parameter 6, you can refer to parameter 5, 4, 3, 2. You can compare so that the reader sees how connected the message is through this. So that when you reach the conclusion, somebody adds up from A to B to C to C, is saying the same thing. Therefore, he agrees with you on what you are concluding about. And later on, we will see how to relate conclusion to recommendation. Okay? Remember that our thrust, our focus is on whether or not the treatments were significant. Okay? Because the treatments are the ingredients we are putting together to try to solve a problem. And the parameters are the indicators of how the effect is changing here, depending on how we are manipulating the treatments. But if for a given parameter, the treatments are not causing a significant effect, then we can only write that in the results, but we don't continue with it. We don't continue interpreting or discussing. Rather, we go for where there were significant differences. Because in any case, if it is not significant, are you going to cause a recommendation for it? I mean, it's saying it doesn't work. So drop it. You cannot end up again discussing this was larger, but you have already said it was not significant. Now, what is larger again? Therefore, it is similar to so and so research. Come on. Sometimes we wonder whether people have not taken one more. If somebody is saying, this one does not work, then what? However, if he's saying it doesn't work, and yet previous science says this works this way, and now for the first time, you are saying it doesn't work, I think you will need to explain. Otherwise, people will just throw away your work. Okay. Okay. Now, we are now writing the interpretation.
We probably need to ask them whether we should continue.
Should we continue or?
It's already fine. It's already 5. I need to ask them, but I think it's better to continue.
No.
Give us a bit more time so we can finish. This is a critical section.
What is your view? We don't want to be talking to ourselves when people have already gone.
The numbers are dropping. Others are complaining that it is time. So maybe you could ask for consensus. Those who want us to continue will type 1 in the chat, and those who don't want to continue, they type 2 in the chat.
No, we don't want to do that.
No, yeah, we continue. There is a lot
We
of
continue.
we continue. So let's continue.
So we continue.
There is a lot of we continue. The
A
eyes
lot of
have it. Sorry that we are shooting beyond time. They have it. So let's continue.
Yes. So you have selected your tables and figures, and now you have table 1. Table 1. And so the starting point always, remember we have the parameters as the subtitles. Okay? We want to see how that parameter responded to the treatments. Whenever the treatments were manipulated, how did that parameter? And when I say parameter, I'm talking about for plants, I'm talking about plant height, germination, whatever, leaf size, probably chlorophyll content, solar radiation, and so on and so on. And for humanities, when I say parameters, it's like age. Age can be both a response and an independent variable. But maybe we can say, how does, for example, how does the size of a class influence the performance of students? So now, when we say performance, we are being prepared. We need to unpack to say what is the performance, and that's what we are going to measure to represent the effect of class size in terms of number of students and the performance of the student, of the class. We want to draw a relationship. So those things we measure become the parameters, the subtitles. Okay? They become the subtitles within which we are going to present the results and discuss. Present results and discuss. Present and discuss those results. We are not discussing something else. So assuming we have table 1, the first statement should tell us where the data are. The data being presented and interpreted, where are they? So that the reader opens the 2 pages and he has the table here and the text here, and is able to track to see whether what you are saying is actually correct. And many people just write a text which is disconnected from the actual data. That happens. And that's incorrect. Okay.
We probably need to say more 15 minutes or what. So, because they are asking how many minutes.
Okay,
Let's hurry
okay.
up.
Let me. Okay. Okay, the data are in this table. Data on A, B, C, D. You don't just say data on this table, but the data on the effect of on this are presented in the table X. Okay. After presenting them, then we go to where there are differences. Where there are differences. Or you can say right from the first statement, the effect of this and this and this was significant in bracket table 1. And when you say it was significant, now we want to see what is behind these significant differences. We may actually try to quantify the differences of the different treatments to your components so that we get the number of folds by how many times one is affecting what. Okay. Then we can draw trends. And draw trends. Yes. And in which direction are the trends? Is it positive or negative, or a mixture of positive and negative? And what is the distribution like? Is the effect more on the positive than the negative? Yeah. By restructuring out this interpretation, you are making it easier for the discussion. Because we have now to explain why this irregularity. Why is the irregularity more skewed towards the positive and not the negative? And so on and so on. And we ask questions. Please ask as many questions as possible and try to answer them. And those will constitute the news in your article. People will like your article very much by appreciating your original contribution. And remember, we are doing all this without literature around us. But the literature, I mean, we are what we are because of literature anyway. Yeah. Yes. We say the curve. Is there a response curve? That's what the first bullet up there is saying. Are there correlations, parameter correlations? Now, you can correlate the size of stones with the size of eggs. For some reason, you will always get something like a correlation. But does it make sense? Does it make sense that contributes to answering to the study objective? So we don't want correlations that are just for the sake. No? But before you make sense out of the correlations, you draw them and then select which ones you have to continue with that contribute significantly to your subject matter. Okay. I think we can stop there.
No, just wind up. We have. Oh, yeah, we can stop there.
Yeah.
That's another presentation. We can start there tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll start there tomorrow. So, thank you very much for stretching with us. I don't know how many people we are remaining with.
Yeah, they are there.
I think this is a core. For those who are really serious in writing, this is one of the challenging things. And by the way, the best thing is after this workshop, go and practice and keep using the information. If you don't, you are going to lose it.
So if we are done, is there one or two questions? Yeah, we still had a couple of slides to share about results. This section of results, it's a key section, but we'll end it here. And we have already shared the presentation for today. We decided to drop this in the chat room to make life easy, because when I opened the question and answer, most of the requests there were about materials. But we have an assignment for today. Thanks for those that responded to the assignment for yesterday. And for today, we are doing independent study. And the request is that please read the resource materials provided. We have shared. There is no excuse now that there are no materials. We have shared. So read the materials provided and pick out at least 3 key issues. And we expect that you should be able to share your reflections on the issues of interest that you've picked out. It could be something you don't like. I have shared, for example, how to avoid plagiarism and so on. Or it could be something that you actually like. So 3 issues, pick out 3 issues. Again, feel free to share them with me on my email. Yeah, and we'll pick it up from there. Unless the Reform Secretariat would like to close from us, we are done for today. And apologies for stretching this. It's supposed to end at the top of the hour.
Yeah, yes, thank you so much. From Reform side, we just thank you facilitators for insightful session today. And also we thank all participants for active participation and engagement. And just to remind that we meet tomorrow at some time. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Yeah, just before we close,
Please,
somebody
go ahead.
says materials not yet seen. I now don't know how best we can help each other, because we've been dropping this directly in the chat room. So I don't know. We are surely not going to pick emails and then share this. It's not effective. I also noticed Ruforum has put this into a link and shared the link. So now, how best can we be of help? Can we have at least one participant or 2 confirm that they have actually received the material?
They've received, maybe they can reshare on the chat with others, because we have been resharing several times. So if,
Yes.
like, I know they have a WhatsApp group which they can actually throw those materials as well.
Yeah, I see. I have received all of them. I have received materials I already received as PDF formats. Yes, we're using PDF formats because they are less bulky. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
So whoever has not received, consult with your colleagues. But we are also open. Please feel free to drop me an email. Sometimes maybe our data is low and we can't download, but still, if I share with you to your email, you will still have to download. Yeah, but as facilitators, we are available. We can share. Even on your emails, drop me an email and I will share. Okay, thank you for today.